as I mentioned at the very beginning of Mass, Transfiguration is a moment in which we encounter the light of God. And when we step into that light, we see light itself. We see the way. We see how we're supposed to act. And we actually, as Vatican II would say, and St. John Paul II would remind us over and over again, that it is through the mystery of Christ that the mystery of man is fully revealed to him. So we don't know who we are unless we have Christ and his light showing us who we are. Who we are in our original nature. Sin is not part of our original nature. Yes, there's an original sin and we were born with this woundedness, but in the beginning it was not so. We were created in the image and likeness of God. And Christ came, and the Transfiguration, this image of light, is just that reminder of he came to ultimately not just conquer sin, but to transform us, to transfigure us, to make us shine with that same kind of light. To take that bold step of loving our neighbor as ourselves in a way that only Christ could do. Through this humility, through this kenosis, which means emptying yourself. When we empty ourselves and allow the Lord to be the one who has dominion over our heart, that's when we're able to act rightly. So in that context, I just want to share on this day, the 75th anniversary of this horrible event, in which just many multitudes of innocent people were killed. And again, it was the beginning of this time of the nuclear age of terror, this fear. And maybe some of you remember growing up. I remember it on the tail end, but just that fear of having to do missile drills and going under your desks, and I mean just that spirit, that culture of fear there, and that escalation that would happen, whether it was in the Cuban Missile Crisis or even we see this in North Korea right now, in China. There's just a lot of this experience of fear and the potential of what could happen if someone makes the wrong move, the destruction of the whole planet, the whole human race. So this is what our Holy Fathers have spoken about. Actually, before that, I just want to share with you, what does the Catechism actually say about this? Because a great thing to do is to look at the different issues within our society, and you'll find all of them in some sort of way found here, even just like a little seed form, and it kind of gives you kind of a starting point. So I want to just share with you what the Church has said through all the different Holy Fathers since the Second World War. So it talks about this. It talks about every act of war. This is paragraph 2314. Every act of war directed to the indiscriminate destruction of whole cities or vast areas with their inhabitants is a crime against God and man, which merits firm and unequivocal condemnation. And that's actually from the Second Vatican Council. And that was a document that St. John Paul II wrote. And it goes on saying, a danger of modern warfare is that it provides the opportunity to those who possess modern scientific weapons, especially atomic, biological, or chemical weapons, to commit such crimes. The accumulation of arms, so this is what we call the arms race, strikes many as a paradoxically suitable way of deterring potential adversaries from war. Principle of deterrence. If I have something here, then that's going to help stop this person from thinking twice about, from doing that. They see it as the most effective means of ensuring peace among nations. This method of deterrence gives rise to strong moral reservations. The arms race does not ensure peace. Far from eliminating the causes of war, it risks aggravating them. Spending enormous sums to produce ever new types of weapons impedes efforts to aid needy populations. So if you think about the fact of producing more and more and more weapons, this over-armament, imagine all of that money could have been utilized to help those who are hungry. And it goes on saying, it thwarts the development of peoples. Over-armament multiplies reasons for conflict and increases the danger of escalation. And then Gaudium et Spes, this is that document that St. John Paul II helped to write in the Vatican Council. The arms race is one of the greatest curses on the human race, and the harm it inflicts on the poor is more than can be endured. Those are some pretty heavy words to really think about. Now, hear what St. John Paul II said here. In 1981, he went and visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki with his Holy Father. And he stood at the Peace Memorial in Hiroshima. So today, 75 years ago, that bomb was dropped that destroyed Hiroshima. And he said that since the bombing of the city in 1945, nuclear stockpiles have grown in quantity and in destructive power. Nuclear weaponry continues to be built, tested, and deployed, making the destruction of humanity a real possibility. And then he goes on saying, on this very spot, where 35 years ago, now it's 75 years ago, the life of so many people was snuffed out in one fiery moment. He says, I wish to appeal to the whole world on behalf of life, on behalf of humanity, on behalf of the future. And then Pope Benedict XVI goes on when he speaks in this World Day of Peace, and he says that the possession of nuclear weapons as a defensive strategy is not only baneful, but completely fallacious. And he says in the nuclear war, there would be no victors, only victims. The truth of peace requires that all, whether those governments which openly or secretly possess nuclear arms, or those planning to acquire them, agree to change their course by clear and firm decisions, and strive for progressive and concerted nuclear disarmament. He said that in 2006. And then Pope Francis continues this tradition here, saying the total elimination of nuclear weapons is both a challenge and a moral and humanitarian imperative. So this is what our Holy Fathers have been saying, and Pope Pius XII, back in 1945, talked about it, and even talking about the experience right after the dropping of this bomb as being the most terrifying weapon that the human mind has ever conceived. So, how are we called in the light of truth to work towards peace, and what does this mean right here? What it doesn't mean is that you just, in a very imprudent way, just say all of a sudden, I'm just going to stop having any of these weapons, because if the other country, let's say if we just stopped and the other country didn't, then that could be a very dangerous situation. But it does mean not using nuclear deterrence, of saying, well, I have to have these in order for you not to do anything with them. In the past, that was seen as a moral strategy there, of saying I'm going to limit the destructive power of these things by having something to stop. But in our world right now, it's becoming more of an excuse. In our country and other countries as well, that the whole principle of nuclear deterrence is going into the sense of, this gives me an excuse to just keep having more and more and more. And again, it goes back to this idea of you're building these up, you're over-armoring, but in doing that makes the other person over-armor, and you just keep going up and up and up, and you can only do that for a certain period of time. At some point, someone is going to make a mistake. And so the only way to really work towards peace that will last is not deterrence, but is actually the healing of heart and the ability of becoming vulnerable with the other and saying, let's actually honestly, clearly, and firmly work together so that we don't face this horrible holocaust of a nuclear war. Because if you just keep going in this way, again, sooner or later, someone is going to get angry who has power and says enough, and maybe does something imprudent. And the moment that happens, and there's so many movies about this, so many situations, you can look at Crimson Tide, you can look at, a lot of these different movies, and they speak about this reality, that the moment someone fires, there are others that are all ready to fire, and no one wins that battle. Everyone loses. So this is why the Church and the Holy Father speak so boldly about this, saying to the whole world, to our country and to other countries, you can't use this as an excuse to just have power. You have to truly, if you're going to have those nuclear weapons right now, you have to start working towards the complete disarmament in the entire world of it. And if you say, I'm willing to have this as deterrent, but I'm not willing to budge in my ability to lessen that escalation, then you're actually doing something immoral. That's something that we have to really stand as a country, and other countries need to do this as well, to stand in that light of truth of Christ, and to say, how do I work towards the common good, which is for all of these countries to work towards an insurance that we don't have to have these particular weapons that could threaten the entire humanity. And also, again, as that secondary thing that's here, how much money is wasted on this that could be used for so much more good. I think it was Pope Pius XII, 1945, said, this energy has such power and such good power to be used to help so many people. But the fear is that it can be used in this wrong way for terrible destruction. With great power comes great responsibility. So let's pray on this day, on the 75th anniversary of when this terrible error in our world started, that we might be able as countries to really have the healing of heart, to get out of our own pride, and to be able to say, I wish for peace. How do I work together? Not telling the other person, you got to do this, but I can't do it. But actually to work together and say, how do we finally let go of these things that cause such threat?